You have heard of the F-16. You have heard of the F-22. But here is something that is going to bother you once you notice it. Where's the F-1? Where's the F-2? Where's the F-7? Did America just skip them? Are they classified? Did they blow up? Or is there a whole hidden history of American fighter jets that almost nobody talks about? The answer is yes. First, what does the F even stand for? Fighter. That is it. But here is what most people do not know. Before 1947, they did not call them fighters. They called them pursuit planes. That is why you had the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt. The P stood for pursuit. When the Air Force became its own branch in 1947, they switched P to F, but the numbering kept going. Then in 1962, everything changed. The Air Force and the Navy had been using completely separate naming systems. Total chaos. The same jet would have two completely different names depending on who you asked. So the government said enough. They hit reset. One unified list starting from F-1. That is the list we are going through today. F-1 Fury, America's first swept-wing carrier jet based on the famous F-86 Sabre from the Korean War, but built to land on aircraft carriers. By the time it got the F-1 name in 1962, it was basically already a museum piece. It flew, it fought, and then it quietly disappeared. Most people have never heard of it. F-2 Banshee, one of the Navy's very first jet fighters. It flew combat in the Korean War. It had twin engines, straight wings, and guns. By 1962, when it got the F-2 name, it was already retired. It got a number on its way out the door. F-3 Demon. This one mattered. The F-3 was one of the first Navy jets built to carry missiles. Not just guns. It had radar. That was new. The problem was the engine they picked was so unreliable, it was literally killing pilots. They had to redesign the whole thing mid-production. It was a troubled start, but it pointed the way forward. F-4 Phantom II. Here's where it gets interesting. The Navy had a jet called the F-4H. The Air Force had a jet called the F-110. They were the exact same plane with two different names. The Secretary of Defense found out and basically lost his mind. He forced them both to call it the F-4. And the F-4 Phantom became one of the most famous jets ever built. It could carry 18,000 pounds of bombs or air-to-air missiles. Over 5,000 were built. 11 countries flew it. Here's the crazy part. It was originally designed with no gun at all. The thinking was, missiles are the future and guns are old news. Vietnam proved that wrong very fast. They had to bolt a gun pod onto the outside of the jet. The F-4E fixed that permanently. Quick question. Do you think removing the gun from a fighter jet sounds like a good idea? Because in the 1950s, a lot of very smart people thought so. Drop your answer below. F-5 Freedom Fighter. Small, cheap, easy to fix. The US government bought hundreds of these, not for America, but to give to allied countries during the Cold War. Simple enough that smaller nations could actually maintain it. F-6 Skyray. This one looked like a flying saucer. Not joking. The delta wings gave it a weird, round shape that looked like nothing else in the sky. It could climb faster than any US jet of its time, and it broke world records. But it had the range of a sports car on a single tank. Almost no radar. Used for one thing only: scramble fast, intercept something close, and come back. Retired by 1964, F-7 Sea Dart. This one is genuinely bizarre. In the early 1950s, the Navy was worried that supersonic jets could not land on aircraft carrier decks. The approach speeds were too high. So someone asked, what if the jet took off from the ocean itself? Convair built a delta-wing jet with retractable water skis instead of landing gear. The pilot would skim across the ocean surface, lower the skis, and take off from the water. The F-7 Sea Dart was the result. It was the first and only seaplane to ever break the sound barrier. In 1954, test pilot Charles Richburg pushed it supersonic in a shallow dive. Then 4 months later, he was killed when the aircraft disintegrated at low altitude during a public demonstration. The program was immediately canceled. 5 were built, and 3 ever flew. F-8 Crusader. They called it the last of the gunfighters. The F-8 was the last American jet where the gun was the main weapon. Not missiles, not bombs, just guns and a pilot who knew how to use them. In Vietnam, the F-8 had a kill ratio of 19-3 against enemy MiGs. 19 kills, 3 losses. That is an insane number. It also had one of the coolest features in aviation history. The wing could physically tilt upward by 7 degrees during landing to slow the jet down on a carrier deck. France flew it until 1999. F-9 Cougar. By the time it received the F-9 designation, it was more of a trainer than a combat jet. But it was an important step. It tested swept wings on a carrier jet, proving the design worked before faster jets came along. F-10 Skynight. Big, slow, ugly. But it was America's first radar-equipped night fighter jet, and it was terrifying in the dark. In Korea, it shot down more enemy aircraft at night than any other jet. Nobody wanted to mess with it after dark. It later spent its life as an electronic warfare aircraft, jamming enemy radar. Not glamorous, absolutely lethal. F-11 Tiger. The F-11 Tiger is famous for exactly one reason. In 1956, a pilot fired the Tiger's cannon, kept flying, and flew into his own bullets. The jet's curved flight path caught up to the shells it had just fired. The aircraft shot itself down. This actually happened. The pilot survived. Other than that, it had a short career, quickly replaced by faster jets. The Blue Angels flew it for a while, and that was mostly it. F-12. Blackbird. Imagine a missile with a cockpit, Mach 3.2, above 80,000 feet. The YF-12 was the interceptor version of the SR-71 Blackbird. It was built to chase down Soviet bombers at speeds nothing could touch. 3 were built. They set world records that stood for decades. But by the time they were ready, the threat had changed. The Soviets were not coming with bombers anymore. They were coming with nuclear missiles. You cannot shoot those down with a fighter jet. The program was canceled. 3 prototypes exist. That is all that will ever exist. F-13. Never assigned. Skipped on purpose. The number 13 was considered unlucky, and the manufacturer that would have received it flat out refused. So the most powerful military in the world skipped a number because it seemed like bad luck. Let that land for a second. Vietnam changed everything. The United States sent jets loaded with missiles into the sky and then found themselves in close-turning dogfights with nimble Soviet-built MiGs. The missiles did not always work. The jets were not maneuverable enough. The kill ratios were embarrassing. So they went back to the drawing board. What came next were the jets people actually put on their bedroom walls. F-14 Tomcat. The F-14 had wings that physically swept back in flight, wide for low speed, and swept for Mach 2.34. It carried the AIM-54 Phoenix missile, which could hit a target 100 miles away. The radar could track 24 targets at once and engage 6 simultaneously. It was retired by the US Navy in 2006. But here is something wild. Iran still has them. The Shah bought F-14s from America in the 1970s. After the revolution, the US cut off all parts and support. Iran has kept them flying by cannibalizing their own fleet for spare parts for nearly 50 years. That is how good this jet is. F-15 Eagle. One stat. That is all you need. 104 kills, 0 air-to-air losses, ever. In over 50 years of combat, no F-15 has ever been shot down by another aircraft. Not one. It flies at Mach 2.5. Its engines are so powerful it can point straight up and climb like a rocket. It entered service in 1976 and is still being built right now. Some jets age. The F-15 just keeps getting better. Quick question. If you had to pick one jet to fly into a real dogfight, which one would it be? The F-14 Tomcat or the F-15 Eagle? Answer below. F-16 Fighting Falcon. the most produced Western jet. Here is something wild about the F-16. It was intentionally designed to be aerodynamically unstable. Left alone, it would crash. A computer fires 40 times per second to keep it in the air, making tiny adjustments the pilot's hands never could. That instability is actually what makes it so insanely agile. It has a single engine and is cheaper than the F-15. It can do almost everything: dogfight, bomb targets, and sink ships. Over 4,600 were built. 29 countries fly it. It is still in production today. Pilots call it the Viper, not the Fighting Falcon, the Viper. F-17. In 1972, the Air Force ran a competition for a cheap, lightweight fighter to work alongside the expensive F-15. Two companies competed. The YF-17 was remarkable. It had twin engines and was incredibly agile. It could fly supersonic without afterburner. The Air Force chose the F-16. The YF-17 lost. End of story. Or so it seemed. Then Congress told the Navy to pick one of those two jets for their carriers. The Navy looked at the single-engine F-16 and said no thanks, too risky over the ocean. They took the twin-engine YF-17, enlarged it, added carrier equipment, and it became the F-A-18 Hornet. The jet that lost became the Navy's most important aircraft. F-18 Hornet and Super Hornet. The Navy needed one jet that could both fight other jets and bomb ground targets. The Hornet was the answer. The upgraded version, the F-A-18EF Super Hornet, is bigger, flies farther, and carries more. When the F-14 retired in 2006, the Super Hornet took over everything: fleet defense, strike missions, reconnaissance. The Blue Angels still fly the Hornet. Not the most glamorous jet, but it never breaks down. And in the Navy, reliability is everything. F-19, officially never assigned. But in the 1980s, toy companies sold model kits of a fake F-19 stealth fighter, and it looked strangely close to what the real secret jet turned out to be. Many believe F-19 was held in reserve for a classified program. The real secret jet got a very different number on purpose. F-20 Tiger Shark. This one is heartbreaking. Northrop built the F-20 as a cheaper, better alternative to the F-16, from a cold start to supersonic in 60 seconds. Chuck Yeager, the man who broke the sound barrier, called it the finest fighter available. But the US government kept pushing the F-16 to every country that wanted a jet. Nobody would buy a fighter that America itself did not fly. 3 F-20 aircraft were built. 2 crashed at air shows. The program was canceled. One of the greatest jets nobody ever flew in combat. F-21. This one is wild. The F-21 is not an American design at all. It is an Israeli fighter jet that the US Navy leased from Israel in the 1980s for one specific purpose: to pretend to be a MiG. The Navy needed to train its pilots to fight Soviet MiG-21 and MiG-23 fighters. The Israeli jet had a similar performance envelope: fast, agile, delta wing. So the Navy leased a squadron, gave them the F-21A designation, and sent them up against US Navy pilots in training exercises. This is called dissimilar air combat training. The F-21 was returned to Israel by 1989. Its job done. A foreign jet with an American number used to simulate America's biggest enemy. F-22 Raptor. On radar, the F-22 looks like a marble. A literal marble-sized object moving at Mach 1.8 without afterburner. That is called supercruise. It means supersonic speed without burning extra fuel and without the heat signature that makes jets easy to detect. The engines can also physically aim their thrust, a capability called thrust vectoring, letting the jet turn at angles that seem physically impossible. Pilots from other countries who have trained against it in exercises say the same thing. By the time you see it, you are already dead. Only 187 were ever built. The program was cut short because it cost too much. No country can export it. It is too secret. And right now, no jet on Earth can beat it in the air. F-23. In the late 1980s, the Air Force ran a competition for the next stealth fighter. Northrop built the YF-23. nicknamed Black Widow II, a diamond-shaped, alien-looking jet that was faster and stealthier than anything flying. By every technical measure, many engineers argue the YF-23 was better than the YF-22, faster, stealthier, longer range, higher ceiling. Even the program manager of the losing team said, "We knew the numbers. There is no reason we should have lost." But the YF-22 was more agile at low speed, and Lockheed's team fired actual test missiles during the fly-off, showing the Air Force it was combat ready. The YF-23 flew conservatively. Northrop lost. 2 YF-23 aircraft were built and put in museums. And here is an interesting footnote. The Navy's upcoming stealth carrier fighter, currently in development, looks remarkably like the YF-23. The jet that lost in 1991 may finally fly in the 2030s. F-35 Lightning II, the most expensive weapons program in human history, $1.7 trillion across its full lifetime. That number is so large it barely feels real. 3 versions. The F-35A for the Air Force has conventional takeoff. The F-35B for the Marines can take off in a short distance and land vertically like a helicopter, and it is a supersonic fighter jet. The F-35C for the Navy is built for aircraft carriers. It is not faster than the F-22 and not as agile, but it does everything: stealth strike, electronic warfare, reconnaissance, air combat, and it shares data in real time with every other F-35 in the sky. Over 15 countries fly it. As of 2026, F-35 aircraft have been used in real combat operations. It is not theoretical anymore. Next time on JetLore, we leave the fighter jets behind and go somewhere louder, slower, and far more dangerous to fly. The H-Series, American military helicopters. From the Huey that defined Vietnam to the Black Hawk that changed modern warfare forever. Here's what will stop you. One of these helicopters completed a mission so secret that the United States government denied it existed, until the wreckage was photographed on live television in a foreign country. That story is next.